Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you all kinds of tips and tricks for making a busted canvas. Once you learn these basic techniques, you'll be able to make them for any season or occasion. My name is Lisa, and if you're new, a special welcome. I invite you to consider subscribing. Now we'll dive in. This is what you need. You'll need a canvas, and in this case, I'm using some Apple Barrel jet black paint because I want to paint my canvas in a nice opaque black color. Using a sponge brush from Dollar Tree, I painted the strokes vertically and horizontally, and now as you see, I'm just using a heat gun to expedite the drying. Once I get that first coat dried, I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to start preparing our item that we're going to frame. In this case, I'm choosing this beautiful hymn, one of my favorites, Amazing Grace. I bought this on a piece of rice paper. So as you can see now, I have another canvas smaller than the first because that's going to be our inset. These canvases can be purchased almost anywhere. I often buy my small ones at the Dollar Tree for $1.25. The Dollar Plus section has the larger ones. Here, speaking of large, I'm using the industrial sized bottle of Mod Podge that I bought at Michael's with a coupon, and I'm applying, using a sponge brush, the Mod Podge in vertical and horizontal rows. Once I have a nice even coat, I'm going to simply lay my rice paper down. The rice paper is thicker than some of the other items that I've used for decoupage, so I find that it lays beautifully without any need for worrying about wrinkling. It's thick paper and it lays beautifully. Now, as you see, I'm just applying a very light coat of Mod Podge as our surface top coat. And that way it will make sure that it's nicely sealed and evenly finished. Again, though, do a very gentle light coat because you don't want to wet the paper and cause any of the design to be damaged. After applying that thin top coat, I'm using my heat gun to dry it. You can set it aside to air dry as well. Now that our larger painted canvas has thoroughly dried, I'm flipping it over and I'm going to use another gorgeous sheet of rice paper. I go to the paper source and choose beautiful sheets of rice paper, and they are so stunning for projects. I'm using some more Mod Podge now on the back of that painted canvas, and I'm going to cut that piece of rice paper to fit in that inset. After going over the back with a nice even layer, I'm going to lay that rice paper right down in there. For this, you want to use a fairly liberal amount and be sure you get in all the little side crevices. Then we're going to go ahead and lay that rice paper right down and smooth it out with our hands. You want it face up, as you can see, because when we do the bust out technique, that will then show from the front side. After the rice paper is nicely in place, you want to apply some more Mod Podge. Remember, it does dry clear, but we want to create 3 additional layers with a thorough drying in between each because we want that to be a very thick, almost leather-like texture before we cut into it. So here you see I have a fairly liberal amount that I'm using that sponge brush to apply. You can buy the sponge brushes and the smaller bottles of the Mod Podge at the Dollar Tree for $1.25. So here I am just going over it, as you see, in vertical and horizontal fashions, and then we're going to let that dry. I'm using my heat gun again just to expedite the process. Now you see how beautifully clear it dries, and that rice paper has a lovely shimmer. Again, now I'm applying some additional Mod Podge, which I'll do the same application, vertical and horizontal stripes. After that second layer has been evenly applied, we'll again let it thoroughly dry or use a heat gun to hasten the drying, and then we'll do our third and final application. Flipping it over, you can see how beautifully that canvas is dried. I'm using the rest of this bottle of the jet black apple barrel paint just to add some more dots of paint. We don't need another second full coat, but I do want to go over it lightly just to touch up any areas where you can see the canvas showing through or where it has slight marks. One more application will provide a beautifully finished surface. And then I will let that thoroughly dry before we move on to our next step. And once that canvas is thoroughly dried, you can see that the backside also has, and I'm going to add that third and final layer of Mod Podge over top. It does dry beautifully, and with each additional layer of Mod Podge, that paper becomes thicker, and as I mentioned, it almost feels leather-like when you cut into it. As our frame is set aside to thoroughly dry, I'm returning to our focal point, Amazing Grace, and this is nicely dried as well. So the next step is to embellish it, and here the options are limitless. I found these pretty little white pearls, so I decided to go around the perimeter of the paper with these pearls. They're self-adhesive strips, so it makes it really fast and easy to just outline that entire picture. Dollar Tree has a wonderful selection of embellishments, and these little self-adhesive strips of pearls were the perfect accent. Now that I've gone around all four sides, I'm ready to add some glitter. I bought this on Amazon. It's a very fine glitter, and I'm going to use the Mod Podge to act as my glue. I had some remaining on that brush that I had used to apply it to the canvas, so I'm going to go ahead and just dab it gently over the surface of those roses. Then, as a beautiful accent, I'm going to sprinkle some of our glitter. It's a very fine glitter that I'm just using to bring some shimmer and shine to parts of the rose petals. You can see how sparkly that looks. And now that we have our focal point ready to be framed, and we have our frame all set to be busted into, the magic happens. Here you can see I'm taking some sharp scissors. An X-Acto knife would work really well, but I couldn't find mine, so I'm using the point of the sharp end of the scissors here, and I'm just making a vertical and a horizontal cut lines in the center. Once I create that X in the middle there, I'm just cutting outward. Now here you can go as far out toward the frame as you wish. I want to go fairly far out because my image does fill most of that second canvas. You can make 4 lines of cuts, or you can make as many as you wish. Some people make narrow ones and even twist the strips, which is also a pretty technique. But here you can see I'm just taking those scissors and cutting right through it. And you can see how thick that paper is. It really does look like leather at this point, which makes it very easy to cut into, and as you'll see, very easy to roll back, creating a most beautiful effect. Having made all of the diagonal cut lines off of that center cross, I'm now just rolling back each one, and then I'm going to use a drop of hot glue to hold each one in place. You can fashion these in any way that you wish. You can roll them more tightly or more loosely, depending on how you want them to appear. You can see now I'm just holding my finger over the inside of it until the hot glue sets. And here I am just rolling back my second strip. They can be symmetrical or asymmetrical. Again, whatever look appeals to you, it's hard to go wrong because the effect is very dramatic as you create the look of an exploding canvas revealing the artwork that you've chosen to frame. There again, the possibilities are limitless. So now I'm just continuing to show you how I'm rolling back each of our sections and using the hot glue to attach and then hold them in place. And once I get that completely finished, I'll show you how we're going to frame our Amazing Grace. I flipped the canvas over, and then I'm going to use some hot glue to just secure our Amazing Grace inset into the space. Now, it doesn't snuggle down in there. As you see, it kind of will sit on top, which adds a really nice dimension to it. And I was thinking another feature would be to add some string lights behind, and I may try that next as well. Wouldn't that be so pretty to light it up from behind? Here, though, I'm just using some hot glue so that I can attach our canvas. And now I'll just inset that second canvas, flip it over, and you can see it's quite stunning. I'm so pleased with this. It's one of my favorite projects. I've used this technique before, and each one is different but really spectacular. In addition to creating two little ribbons at the bottom, I'm also going to add this crown from Totally Dazzled using a drop of hot glue in the upper right corner. And the finished product is so beautiful. I think you're going to really enjoy making something like this. In previous videos on my channel, I've also demonstrated how to use napkins decoupaged against canvas to create this lovely little chickadee perched on a fall branch. I used some rice paper in a copper color, again creating that leather look against the black painted canvas. Here, I made a Santa Claus busting out of a brick chimney. And to make the Santa Claus, I used a sheet of this paper. It's actually scrapbook paper with a brick pattern. I also used two canvases, the small bottle of Mod Podge from the Dollar Tree, and I used a brush to apply it. This time I used a little paintbrush, and I went back and forth again in those horizontal and vertical stripes. And then I used my heat gun to dry it. This is a different technique I'm going to demonstrate for you now. After that surface was thoroughly dry, I laid my brick patterned scrapbook paper over top. Then I took a piece of parchment paper and laid that on top of the brick patterned paper. Then I used my small iron to iron over the surface. That created a very smooth effect as it reactivated the Mod Podge glue. And you can see that as I remove that parchment paper, the result is a perfectly smooth finish. It looks as though it's one solid piece of brick. And now the front surface is done. We're going to flip it over, and we're going to insert another piece of scrapbook paper on the back side. This is the paper that you want visible from the front. So we're going to lay it right side up, and we're going to cut it in place and then use some Mod Podge to attach it. After you spread that even layer of Mod Podge, all you have to do is lay the scrapbook paper in place. And then just smooth it with your fingers so that it sits nicely. Then we're going to do just as we did in the first project, which is to apply a total of 3 layers of Mod Podge, allowing each layer to dry before adding the next one. And after all 3 coats of Mod Podge have thoroughly dried, we're ready to bust out the canvas. This is always fun. You create that cross shape on the back and then cut outward in diagonal lines. Here you see I'm using those same scissors to just pierce through that center point, creating a vertical line and then creating a horizontal line from which we'll cut all of our spokes. Here you can see I'm cutting each spoke all the way outward, almost to that edge of the wooden frame. You can cut as many of these diagonals as you'd like, and the more you cut, the more rolls you'll have to fold back. Here you can see from the front that I cut my lines in differing lengths, and now I'll roll them all back and we'll frame our Santa Claus. Now you can see Jolly Old Saint Nick is printed on a napkin. I have a Dollar Tree canvas that I want to decoupage the image onto, so I'm going to show you a really fun way. First, you want to open up the napkin, revealing all of the designs, and we're only going to need one, so we'll cut out one of these rectangular portions. Then I'm going to separate the plies. When decoupaging, you only want that top surface layer of the napkin. Some napkins are 2 ply, some are 3, but you want to remove those extra plies. And here you see now that I'm using my scissors to finely cut around the detail of the design. Now that he's carefully cut out, I'm going to turn him upside down on a piece of plastic bag. Then I'm going to spray that with water. Remember, you want the image upside down. As I spray the napkin, you can see it immediately begins to wrinkle. Those are wrinkles we can control. So I'm gently, very, very carefully using my fingertips to pull those wrinkles out. That'll create a nice smooth image that we can then flip onto our prepared canvas. All you need to do to prepare the canvas is to use some Mod Podge. Dollar Tree sells the small bottles for $1.25. They also sell brushes and sponge brushes. Both work well. Apply the Mod Podge in a nice even layer using vertical and horizontal stripes. Once you have a nice even coating, we're going to take Santa Claus and just flip him over onto that prepared canvas. Since he's on that plastic, it's very easy to just lay it down. Now you see it's right side up. After you have it carefully in place, simply remove your plastic bag. You can see that now the image looks as though it's been painted on the surface of that canvas. The next step is just to let it dry. I used my heat gun to expedite that drying process, and now I'm going to embellish him. I left the surface still slightly damp so that the fine glitter that I have here that I purchased from Amazon would nicely adhere to him. After all, a Santa should be sparkly with some new fallen snow dusted on his suit. So now I'm just shaking off the excess, and I'm going to add on a final embellishment, which is some faux fur trim. I had a little bit left over from a stocking, so I'm just going to cut some little pieces of it, and I'll just use that to embellish the pom-pom of his hat. A drop of hot glue holds it nicely in place, and now we're ready to insert our Santa Claus into our prepared busted canvas. A line of hot glue all the way around the outer border of our sparkly Santa Claus canvas will hold it nicely in place on the back of our prepared busted canvas. Here you can see I'm just setting it in place, and when I flip it over, you'll see Jolly Old Saint Nick has busted right through that brick chimney. I decided to add some other embellishments from Dollar Tree, so I added some bows and jingle bells, and you can see that gave it a very festive flair. The possibilities are limitless. As you learn these techniques, you'll see you can design these for any season or occasion. Have fun. Please do comment below. Let me know what you think of the projects. If you have any ideas to share, and I would love for you to consider subscribing if you haven't already. I have loads of fun projects planned for the upcoming holiday. Do take care, and God bless.